Hello Lisa，可以听得到我的声音吗？
Hello，Hello，
可以哈。那麻烦
对，
你测试一下你的 slide，就是你播放看看。
好，稍等一下啊。
好，我这边看得到，你试试看那个全荧幕。OK，好，那下一张看看。好，OK。那 Lisa，不好意思，你先开一下镜头，我们看一下效果如何，就是照你自己。OK，
看到吗？
好，这样可以吗？好，那没有问题。那 Lisa，你大概3:30左右回来就可以了。那你这个方便的话，你就是 online 这条线你就先挂着，然
没问题。
后对，你可以把镜头跟声音先关掉。那你大概3:30回来这样子。
然后整个时间是大概40分钟是吗？
40到50分钟，
哦，那蛮长的，可能我没有那么多内容，
没问题，
就大概
你就
30几、40分钟就会结束这样。
好好没有关系。好，OK，那我们待会见。
好的，好的，谢
好
谢，一
，OK，
切
好。
顺利。好。
不好意思，我提醒大家一下，就是如果外面没有签到的，可能要麻烦大家签到一下，因为我们会最后依据就是实际出席的状况，然后分享讲师的这些简报。所以如果您还没有签到的，麻烦外面签到一下。那待会有3位讲师，第1位跟第3位会是线上。那我们第1位跟第2位讲师会是英语的演讲。那如果需要同步翻译设备的话，麻烦到外面凭个人的证件去换取那个同步翻译的耳机这样子。好，那我们大概在10分钟之后开始。 对，男生女。好，今天谢谢各位的参与，那我们活动就即将开始这样子。好，那这次的活动呢是由那个数位发展部的主办，那谢谢数位发展部的长官们支持这个独立游戏，那我们也谢谢在场的一些合作伙伴，资策会的林嘉锦总监，然后方翔组长，然后还有创梦市集的副总经理。好，那就是大家一起来推动这个独立游戏。那相信在场很多独立游戏的伙伴，都知道独立游戏的生存其实是很困难的。那台湾的游戏产业其实大家也都知道，就是比较大型的公司，大家会做代工啊，或者是代理的方式。那真正在原创开发上面，台湾目前还是就是比较依赖独立游戏的一些努力。那独立游戏呢，就是大家没有资源，那那个生产的时间也比较长。好，那只是说我们最近其实已经慢慢看到台湾一些独立游戏在国际市场上有一些表现的机会，比如说赤足、Sikono 这些，好，那他们都已经有一些崭露头角的机会。好，那现在呢，在游戏的发行上面，其实大家也都清楚，就是依赖 Steam 或者是Apple Store， 然后 Google Play 这些平台，那整个发行已经是变成全球化，那变成说在发行的时候，你的发行商可以协助你怎么样的行销资源，提供怎么样的协助，那你的美术的视觉怎么样让观众可以抓住观众的眼球，这些其实都是非常重要的一些细节这样子。那今天的活动呢，主要就会比较聚焦在美术的呈现，然后还有发行商的一些协助的工作，还有最后是以平台思维，从平台的角度来看一下怎么样利用平台的数据去增加你的客人这样子。好，那这一次呢，由数位发展部的这个计划里面，除了这一次的活动，还包含了一些那个独立游戏的一些辅导啦，这些的培育。那其实，在独立游戏开发的这条路上，大家都知道，这是很辛苦的一条路。那也谢谢各位长官的一些协助，好，让我们可以有一个继续前进下去的一些资源。那继续完成大家对于原创的一个梦想，这样子。好，那活动开始前，我们先安排一个大合照。好，那我们先请我们摄影师从台上往下拍。好，那大家可能稍微方便的话，可以稍微往中间坐一点。好，好，那请那个手举牌也都先拿起来，这样子。好，那我们现在请那个资策会林嘉锦总监，然后创梦市集的代表 Daniel， 那还有方杰组长一起上台，我们先进行一个合照。你们先照我讲师来，你们拍就好了。Hello， yeah。好，谢谢。好， 好，那一开始呢，我们先来看一下这个计划里面对于独立的游戏有一些的辅导。那我们来看一下这个辅导的一些过程，这样子。投影机还没开。投影机，投影机的。好了吗？
我们这款游戏的背景是在一个看脸的时代，那玩家所扮演的角色是一个因为外貌的因素，然后从小被遭受到很多的霸凌。游戏最后的目标是希望能将带领这些看脸风潮的网美消失在网络世界。玩家在游玩途中会得到一些线索的东西，那经过我们的 AI 帮手，可以搜寻到相应的搜寻结果。那这些结果可以拿来帮助玩家完成任务，或者是得到证据，带给大家一个就是外貌并不是一切，充实内心自我才是真实的一个想法。
介绍游戏上可能循序渐进，跟着游戏结构跑，可能还是比较好一点，对，大家比较好去理解你的东西是什么。但因为你要模拟一个虚拟的社群世界嘛，对，这件事情必须要先很忠实的传达给底下的观众知道，那你再接下来讲这些东西才会成立这样子。
那它就是一款黑色电影风的动作游戏，那它基于枪战以及极富暴力美学特色的动作演出为主打这样子。玩家有各式各样的经验玩家使用，在侧面对两个持有不同的敌人比较棘手的状况，所以我选择不同的战术，我绕到敌人身后进行攻击，这样子就比较有效率的快速带走敌人。
可以在已经有的动作上再做，第一个是镜头转换，然后第二个是时间模式，再一个就是动作的再去做强化或是延伸。那重点都是一个，就是让你的主角动作或者你标准的一些动作，让它看起来更帅、更具有魅力。
它是一款黑色科幻的点击冒险解谜游戏。最左边这张图就是我们游戏场景的画面，然后中间的物件都可以使用点击来跟它进行互动。点击之后呢，就会进到我们的特写场景。在这个场景通常会有机关或者是解谜或者是一些动画的场景都在这个场景展现。
不要怕说，我钱开太高，把人家吓走。如果你东西好，你开500万钱的话，他就会进来。那如果你东西不好，就算50万、10万，他都不会投你。对，所以我觉得你可以放胆去拉高一下。
恶搞了许多经典的游戏，像刚才提到的《一线龙龙》啊，或是我们小时候经常看到的打交道游戏。我们需要透过这些经典的画面去引起玩家的共鸣，所以我们将经典游戏结合迷因，我们希望最后可以发展成是一个联谊版的复仇者联盟。那玩家也可以在这些游戏的过程中呢，看到许多大大小小不同的彩蛋，可以让在游戏的过程中感受到这样的欢乐。
就你们的游戏其实是相对其他来说是比较难想象的，所以我真的觉得如果可以具体的把一个实例或是配合 screenshot 讲解完一部分，让大家知道解谜跟迷因的结合是什么，其实会非常好懂。
这款游戏它有个特色是它剧情非常的峰回路转，它结局可能会颠覆你的想象，会反转再反转这样子。好，那这是我们的游戏画面，刚才有提到有一个过去的影像世界，右上角的话就是他们有个幅画想出5个人的愿望，那我们就是解完一个关卡，故事章节之后就会听到他们的愿望是什么。
你中间这1年里面有很多人经营，你要开始去 deliver， 让大家知道你一直在进步，有那种共进退，然后大家会很期待给一些意见、想法等等之类的互动出现。
5万套听起来已经很多了，就才刚好打平是发生什么事，可是现实就是这样子。这就是为什么很多团队毕业出来做完第一款作品就不见了，因为他们就是没卖到这个数字。现在你们知道为什么他们会不见了？因为你们觉得可能听起来很多的数字，可能就是你们基本要做到下一款的需求而已。
好，这是我们在这一次活动之前做的一些独立游戏辅导的一些课程。那接下来我们就 交给第一位讲师。第一位讲师是王世凯，他在台湾出生，那在美国长大，他现在是邦举这间公司的美术总监。那他会告诉我们说，他有一些想法，在他的背景东方跟西方融合之下，在美术这一块该怎么样的呈现这样子。那世凯后面就交给你了。好，谢谢。
好。大家看得见吗？有没有问题
？OK。
好。OK，Hello，大家好，我的名字叫王志凯，在游戏世界里我是叫 Chic Wang。我们这次的主题是在东西方美术交汇的世界中崭露头角。无论你是亚洲人或是西方人，我们一起来了解一下如何突破到国外的市场里。关于我是在台湾台北出生的，8岁的时候移民到美国。就在那一瞬间，我体会到新的西方文化，那从小喜爱的日本漫画和卡通呢，就这样消失了。我自己也开始慢慢了解到两方的文化和艺术的交汇，没想到这一点对我们这个行业特别的有帮助。在美国上大学的时候，碰巧的成为了一个创业游戏开发者。毕业了以后，并加入了 Bungie， 成为最后一站的概念设计师。最后一站1到3，慢慢的从角色设计师晋升到了命运的专案美术指导。好，不好意思，现在从演讲的大纲我就换成英文，毕竟我是在美国当游戏开发者，游戏的用词，专业的艺术术语呢，都是比较常用英文的。Here's the general outline for our talk. We're going to go through a brief history of pop cultural exchange. We'll talk about some examples of cross-cultural influences that have worked and remain as landmark successes. Lost in translation. We'll talk about how it's not easy to understand what works with another culture. Finding your cultural voice. Let's talk about leveraging your background and culture to stand out against the crowd. Diverse marketplace means diverse market share. This is now a bustling new online tech age where there is an audience for everyone's work. How do you capitalize on it? The future. Let's summarize and look onward from understanding the past. First off, let's talk about the type of art we plan to discuss today. It isn't fine art or contemporary art or classical art. We're talking about pop art, the type that the general populace is entertained by, and one that is easily consumed. We're talking about entertainment art, the type that combines video, film, animation, game design, even television, and is meant to be distributed similarly to pop art. Now let's take a look at some early examples of these culture exchanges. From the East, you have Yojimbo, 1961, by Akira Kurosawa. From the West, A Fistful of Dollars, 1964, by Sergio Leone. Two movies by two great directors. Akira Kurosawa was a renowned storyteller and filmmaker. His influence spanned far and wide beyond Asia. Sergio Leone has said many times that A Fistful of Dollars was a remake of Yojimbo, but in a Western take, citing the film as a big influence. But even Akira Kurosawa himself looked even earlier to Shakespeare and Dostoevsky as inspirations for his earlier period drama piece, Throne of Blood. These were some of the first entertainment art directly acknowledging cultural influences. From the West, Mad Max 2, 1981, by George Miller. From the East, Fist of the North Star, 1983, by Bronson and Tetsuro Hara. Another notable cross-cultural exchange, one of my favorites, this time from the West to the East. Tetsuro Hara took strong inspirations for his main character, Kenshiro, to closely resemble the outlaw bounty hunter in Mad Max. but spun it in a way that appealed to the Eastern market by adding martial arts and fantastical powers and characters. At around the same time, Akira and Blade Runner both came into the picture, independent of one another, but both were pivotal in shaping the language for the world of cyberpunk. What is interesting is that instead of taking direct influence into their art form, they use elements from the other culture discreetly to help sell their world, setting, and story. Akira incorporated science fiction in a way that was unprecedented in manga at that time. Blade Runner had Asian themes in the movie to help build out a robust and diverse world of cultures coming together. In the 80s is when we start to see an increase in pop art, entertainment art start to influence each other in a larger scale. This primarily started with Japan and the US, where each side continued to take opportunities to take influences and either inspire or be inspired by to create content with clearer cross-cultural references. These weren't the only ones, nor the only type of art created. But the thing to note is the growth and the trend of crossover during that decade, and how they cemented a bunch of IP and brands that are continuing to this day. I bet you can spot which ones are still here. Back then, cross-influences were few. Geopolitical climates between countries did not make sharing easy, and thus a lot of entertainment moved around globally slower. That slowness was coupled by the physicality of the goods that need to be moved from one area of the world to another, which compounded the delay due to distance. Different countries had different laws on imports and how they could be shared, because the profits from these ideas and influences face different laws, taxation, and regulation. Fast forward to the mid-90s, and that is when the internet changed everything. From the mid-90s, the world has steadily grown online, to one of which we are now a global audience and a global market. This means the information sharing is now fluid. I can easily see what is affecting culture from one country to the next. Because of all these steady growth in users and their willingness to share information, it is readily available to anyone who wants to search for it. Most importantly, there are no borders. You can glimpse into another country and their culture much easier than ever. The whole world is nearly all online. This makes the information sharing simpler and faster. This also makes the internet the most diverse place in the world, where everyone can be exposed to something new that isn't from their background. With all this information comes downsides. As we've grown older in the internet age, we start to feel overwhelmed with the amount of information. That has forced us and the software and companies to find ways to simplify and categorize the information that gets presented to us. Humans are not capable of withholding that much information and decipher how to approach the differences. These selective information, the artists have to take it in, and it comes out oftentimes as exchanged ideas in the art. What are we talking about when we say pop cultural exchange? Is really the globalization of art. It has many implications of upsides and downsides. Let's get into these in the next part. Part 2, lost in translation. Okay, borders are gone. Now what? Doesn't this mean global market equals global audience? While it's technically true, they are your potential audience, so long as you are speaking the languages that the audience understands and they don't get lost in translation. And how do you know what resonates with the East versus the West? Let's not forget there are downsides to when everything is everywhere. Sometimes more is just more. It also means anyone can take that information and make bad choices, or worse, just straight up copy and reuse without really understanding what is working from the source to begin with. So then, how do you choose what resonates when your audience is so vast? How do you know if what you pick as influence is something worthwhile and unique when everyone gets access to the same content? Let's start by speaking to relatability. Is your work speaking a visual language that the audience understands? Are you communicating in a way that they can relate to? Do you know your audience? Do you understand how much or how little they perceive your culture and background? Understanding holistic cultures is impossible, especially if it's not your own. It's human to want to simplify and bucket perceptions and ideas of things you don't understand. Pop culture oftentimes is used as a communication tool to help us get very basic understanding of another culture. If we were the East looking to the West, there are some general perceptions. Strong attitude, or confidence and swagger. Daring, the willingness to try the unexpected. Independent, someone who chooses and speaks freely. Brash, sometimes rude and irreverent. Or sophisticated, also sometimes refined and exquisite. This goes both ways. Western perspectives can be just as shallow and often generalized. Sometimes they think of us as exotic, as exciting and unfamiliar, as mysterious, the potential of the unknown, or traditional, thousands of years of history, collective, often seen as one of many. Martial arts, sometimes they expect physical prowess, and sometimes they think we're shy, non-assertive. How do we take these perceptions and use them to our advantage versus it being just a generalized stereotype? Stereotypes are often too simplistic of a breakdown, especially if we're talking about judging people. But in this case, we're going to use them to help inform some base premise of approaching pop art. Now, where do international artists congregate and why are they successful? You have to do your research. In our information age, we have borderless metrics to access. Instagram, Twitter, and ArtStation are 3 top social media sites that I and Bungie use regularly to scout and keep tabs on talent and trends. We have hired internationally and found what is working versus not from social media alone. I often use it to see how artists' art from different regions of the world resonate with people. Regional metrics are readily available to look into with regards to reports of top streaming, selling, and rated content. These offer multiple cross-checks of pop culture and entertainment and how they're being consumed and received. It offers an insight to see if trends and influences are truly global by comparison to one another. If you're interested in expanding into a region, pay attention to the trends and find an information to give you some insight. Globalization of art has many downsides. It is more competitive and harder to stand out. With some good understanding of who you're trying to capture, how to capture, and what to use as elements, you can feel lost. And at worst, you are stereotyping a region without really doing your homework. So then, how do you capture this potential audience properly? In the next part, we'll talk about a surprisingly unique and very individualized method that any artist can take to create their own voice. It's time to look at how to stand out. Now, this is an art, not a science, meaning it will take many tries and attempts before finding something that works. And also, it isn't a formula that you can just follow all the steps listed later and then be guaranteed to work. That is because everyone has different tastes, including you, the artist. Be mindful of how your own taste is working for you or against you. Each one of us have different upbringings and history that can add color and flavor to the work we do. They also create biases that can limit us. Be open to new things to try and incorporate into your art and see how your background is helping, or sometimes not. Timing is everything. Let's say if the Matrix movie came out now, I don't think it would have as big of an impact as it did then. The creative timing is just as important as the creative artwork itself. Let's start this approach by first determining your audience. Keep in mind the previous generalized perceptions from each region. Are you trying out one of the generalized perceptions? If so, which one? Do your homework on what about these generalized perceptions work and have it not be shallow and stereotype. This will help you pick the right elements to present. Your background and culture. These are the unique tools you have that can bring freshness in an otherwise overly abundant copycat market, or bring awareness and uniqueness into a market full of shallow crossovers. When you look at the artworks that are being shared around in your research, are there elements unique to your culture you're not seeing, but can be brought to the table and add distinctiveness? Now that you have the audience and elements, let's think about how to mix them. How much of your cultural element are you combining with your art that balances global relatability and your uniqueness? After all, you want your art to resonate as much as possible globally, but retain your authentic cultural element. If in doubt, a general rule of thumb is an 80, 15, and 5 ratio mix. It can be 80% cultural, 15% relatability, 5% accent, or mixed in a different order. This general rule of thumb allows the themes to speak clearly without confusion. Do this in your own way. Beyond the proper mix, your execution of style need to be unique and not following the styles of others. Information abundance means it's easy to get lost in the crowd. All the ingredients you use need to all try to stand out from it. Just like when you first started drawing, you start by referencing the real world, not just pop art. Good reference images will bring authenticity to your work and round out your art with nuance and detailing that you won't be able to make up easily. Even great artists like Kim Jung-gi, Craig Mullins, are constantly looking at references to bring life to their art. Embrace the software tools and let it help you. We use Pinterest exclusively when searching for images because their algorithm of suggesting related imagery is superior to Google, because it understands the focus you're looking at and will recommend great suggestions. Be clear about what you want to say in your art. If I start with the 80-20% ratio, then your primary theme should be the dominant idea theme, which would be the 80%, like this example with the burden over growth. If we add a secondary element of only 15%, which in this case is an architectural element that is clearly distinct from the primary theme, this leaves you with some space left for something else. This room now has an opportunity to throw in an accent, or either theme or something new to complement or round out a clear theme and idea. As you create your work, you need to judge and assess if it's working or not. There are some simple ways to do this. When approaching the designs in your art, treat those designs as real products and approach details and thought in similar ways. How is it constructed? How is it manufactured? How is it put together? Does it break down? What areas of wear and tear? What about material responses, etc.? Would you buy your own product and what you've designed? Does your art have enough value that makes it interesting and exciting for people to want to buy or be a part of it? A great way to compare these designs is to compare it to real products and see how they hold up. If you're designing some tech, is it closer to Apple or more like Alienware? If you're designing a vehicle, is it closer to Rolls-Royce or Tesla? Now let's take a look and walk through some examples that I believe are successful crossovers of influences. This is Lingy 000. Personally, I think he figured out how to pick the right cultural element from his own personal background and history, figured out which of the general perception lens they want to convey to that international audience, and mix those elements together in a standout style. What I like a lot about Ling Yi's pieces is he puts an adventurous schoolgirl of an obvious Asian background into a desolate, often urban environment devoid of any other life except for her and sometimes her companion horse. This speaks to the perception of independence and daring, and then combining it with a cultural element that he knows the audience resonates with. The 80-15-5 ratio is in good play here, but this time as a mixture and proportion of themes. The urban setting is the 80%. The schoolgirl and the old traditional archery element is the 15, leaving the last 5 for a weird accent of floating white spheres. This clarity makes all the elements very compelling and highlights the irony of this juxtaposition. Here's another example. See if you can make out the different ratio proportions and what is considered the primary, secondary, and accent. Now, these are what resonates with me, both as an artist from 2 cultures and also as an art director. Looking at the number of followers he has on Instagram, I believe many feel the same way. Here's another example from the other side. Machi Kuchera, an individual who has been heavily influenced by 80s and 90s anime, manga, and found his own way to bring new life of his own take of crossovers. Machi does most of his art in 3D after he sketched out the composition and renders it in a fashion that is akin to 90s style manga, like Ghost in the Shell or Akira. In an art world that has for a period of time chased after hyper-real or painterly style, Machi looked into the past and brought forward a style that combined the aesthetic sensibilities of Asian cyberpunk manga and infused in a Western 3D process and attitude. The elements he chose to combine were that of Eastern manga styling with the relatability of Western attitude and action. Last example, we have the late and great Kim Jung-gi. May he rest in peace. Kim Jung-gi has captured the hearts and minds of people since he bursted onto the social scene in 2011 at the Busan Comic Festival in Korea, where his video of drawing a giant live mural was posted on YouTube and it went viral. If there was an individual that encapsulated all the points that I've said above, it would be Kim Jung-gi. His brush style painting kept in line with the cultural background from where he came from, but the subject matter and depiction included ranged from anything to everything. Nothing was off limits for Kim Jung-gi. When you couple his ability to do it live against a world that is now used to instant gratification, his talent becomes easily respected and valued. Videos of his process capture the world, a combination of his craft capabilities, but also with the ease of digital distribution that the internet has granted. Overnight, he instantly grew his potential audience and market share because the world was primed. Kim Jung-gi talked a lot about referencing objects and how it affects his art. He practiced over such a long period of time so that he understood every object from every angle, that he could do it from memory. But he didn't only do it on his own background. Instead, like we mentioned earlier, nothing was off limits. These combinations allowed his art to penetrate into marketplaces and audiences with relatability while clearly seated in his own Korean cultural take. Nearly a perfect blend. I want to take this moment to pay my respect to one of the greatest artists of my generation. May he rest in peace. As we finish part 3, we have to remind ourselves that this is art, not science. You win some, you lose some. If we all knew how to capture successfully every audience every time, then this wouldn't be such a mystery. Creative endeavors are always a risk. That risk comes with both pluses and minuses. Be mindful of what you are putting out and how you are leveraging your culture and others, which leads us to the next part. Part 4. Diverse world means diverse audience for your work. As Kim Jung-gi clearly exemplifies, if you capture your international audience, you have a whole world who can be your market share. Start this by working with diverse people. In order to get out of your background bias and challenge yourself artistically, you need to work with people who have different views, gain new perspectives, which then becomes more tools to help you broaden the appeal of your art. Working with other people and really understanding where they come from means you are more able to respectfully represent an element if you are going to incorporate them in your content. It becomes less shallow. When that happens, your product is more inclusive and clearly more diverse. It means you have more authentic elements to pull from and mix into your art, which ultimately makes your art and product gain a bigger marketplace. Now, traveling is a simple but effective way to diversify your perspective and understand new marketplaces. Physically being in a different culture will force you to reconsider your own position. This helps with identifying your own blind spots, thinkings, and misunderstandings you don't usually see until you are put in a place to think about it. However, if you aren't open to those newfound perspectives, it's pointless. You can only incorporate learnings if you are open to them. Lastly, as responsible artists, you owe it to other cultures you're representing to understand it deeply. Remember, we aren't trying to stereotype their culture into your art. The seamless and ever online art world needs diversity in ideas. First and foremost, there are audiences waiting for you to bring your unique mix of culture and relatability to the table. The global market has room for your cultural voice. They benefit from you bringing a unique take and mix that they haven't been exposed to. In a world that is full of shallow copycats, your unique mix make it easier to stand out. Ultimately, proper representation and authentic diversity makes the marketplace an equal playing field for everyone. And your real cultural voice will start to shed some older generalized perceptions from both sides. Your upbringing, background, and cultural past can help you distinguish your art in this new world. Be brave and dare to represent a part of you that many do not know yet. Be critical on how you approach your art and what you're putting out in the world. This new fluid global market means there's an audience for your work. Just look at all the amount of different types of digital creators out there, from streamers to mukbangs, podcasts to ASMR, and how each niche has their own community and market. Trends come and go. How can you examine trends and weigh it against the past, history, and culture of other trends and see if it's worth following or not? We're just on the cusp of a new digital art revolution with AI, VR, AR, NFTs. If history serves us right, artists oftentimes are the spearheads to adopt new mediums, to create and venture into new territories. Just look at all the video games from the 80s and 90s and the art that came with it, and the IPs that are lasting even until now. Bring yourself with it and create your own future. In fact, there are already trends in other entertainment, which, as we've seen before, that it provides clues for where the future heads. Music and films, as an older form of entertainment art, can pave way and hint at new ways to approach the art and audience. Polyphia is a groundbreaking metal band that is changing how people think about metal and guitar playing, which is led by Tim Henson, who is half Chinese and half Caucasian, but takes influences from everywhere. Cixou, who people in Taiwan should recognize as pushing boundaries on what it means to be non-binary and using modern digital art as part of their live shows. Yang Ziqiu, Michelle Yeoh, and Tianma Xingkong, pushing what it means for Asian characters in Western cinema in representation and crossing boundaries in meaningful and impactful ways that are not shallow. I hope this talk gave you some insights into your own art and some new approaches to your craft and perspectives on how to engage with a personal and potential global audience. There are great possibilities and a bright future for new and upcoming artists. Very excited to see what people are going to come up with next. Thank you. I hope you found this talk enjoyable and informative. 谢谢。
OK， 谢谢世凯。好，那现场这边有没有人有想要什么问题要发问的呢？有没有人问题啊？好。
Hello. Can you you talk about diverse people brings diverse views, and can you give us some example in Bungie? Maybe more concrete example how these diverse people can benefit your product.
Yeah. The first example I have is a personal one. I was the first Asian in Bungie, and so I brought to Halo a bunch of anime and manga influences to the Master Chief, to the Covenant race. And I think I put in Twitter a bunch of different inspirations from Gundam for how the armor came together for some of the Covenant race. And that, I think, helped to bridge multiple audiences beyond just Americans into, I think, Halo in that game. Another example is that our concept artists are made up of folks from Singapore, from Russia, and from, I think, Sweden. And I think it's important when you're making an international product to have multiple different audiences and different artists that actually work on the product, because that allows them to bring their perspective and their culture into the game. That then makes the game, it becomes part of the DNA for the game.
OK， 好，那现场还有没有其他问题？好。
Hello, thank you, Mr. Wang, for your great talk. And when you mentioned there's a find your culture voice, and this is an art, not science. Furthermore, you mentioned you win some and you lose some. And for me, for my understanding, there's a typical culture, the culture of the crowd will usually approach to something that's similar. So when you are designing your art form, if does that mean you have to determine what to win and what to lose? But it's like,
Yeah,
maybe
I mean,
like
I think
oh,
any.
please.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Please go on.
没有关系，你先讲，你先讲。
Okay.
没问我。
I mean, it's like maybe if I want to target the Western cultural, maybe I want to make like I don't know, like a steampunk themed game. Is that okay for me to add some maybe like very localized Taiwanese history inside that? And does that create like weird vibe which I lost both part of the market?
I don't think so. I mean, first of all, I think when I say you win some and lose some, not everything is going to win all the time, right? Like I think any creative endeavor is a risk. Anytime you put any sort of creative thing out there, it's always a risk. So your example of steampunk is a good one. If you remember, Akira Kurosawa also made a whole anime called Steam Boy, right? And that Steam Boy was all about steampunk. But the characters and everybody was all from the Japan culture. And I don't think that movie didn't do as well as obviously Akira. But it worked. I think there was a lot of great storytelling and a lot of setting and world setting that worked really well. I don't know if the world was ready at that time for that sort of crossover. I think so. That's why part of the creative timing is important, because you have to kind of look at trends. You look at Twitter, you look at Instagram, see what thing people are working on, see if they're missing something that is unique, and you have some sort of voice that you want to say, and whether or not the timing is correct. It's not always going to be wins, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't try.
Thank you.
现场这边还没有什么，有没有其他人要发问？好。
Hi, my name is Kevin. First of all, I'm a huge Destiny 2 fan. Actually, right before I came here, I just did a Duality Dungeon speedrun. So, yeah. So awesome. My question is, do you think in gamers or the gaming market audience in general are more accepting or non-judgmental when it comes to diverse art style?
I think that's a great question. First of all, thank you for being a fan for Destiny. I think that's we love it when we have international fans. Taiwan's a big one. Obviously, I'm Taiwanese, so I'm super excited to have Taiwanese fans. I believe so. I think, like I said before, if you look at video games and the art that comes with it, like even in the 80s, we're very open to accepting other forms because this group, like I think the geeks and the nerds are accepting and very open to trying new things. And I think the digital and the tech world allows people to kind of like be exposed to a lot of these things. And if you look at the younger crowd, I bet it's in Taiwan as well too. If you look at the younger folks and younger generation, they're constantly being exposed to all these new things. And so this is regular for them. Just as the way you think about how you're growing up. Like if it's becoming regular for you, it's not a big deal. It's only a big deal because you haven't been exposed to it. So I think that exposure helps to create that sort of like idea of being okay with newness.
OK， 好，那我们再开放2个问题，还有没有其他人要发问
？Sorry to ask again. Maybe it's a more personal question. Do you think modern Japanese anime style is widely accepted by American? Do you think if we bring a Japanese style anime like the character to the US, is there any adjustment needed for the US market?
I believe so. I mean, if you look at the trend of the current anime and manga, they're really leaning to cute. I think in the 90s, in the late 90s, there were a lot of like cyberpunk stuff, but I think they're leaning more towards cute now. So a lot of movies like Your Name and all these other ones are very much schoolgirls and teens sort of thing. I think the idea of schoolgirls and school teenagers shonen and stuff like that is interesting, but you have to have a spin that relates it to the West. So I think an artist that I really like is Zine Chen. I think if you know who that is, you can probably look it up on Instagram. Or Lingy, like I said, is a good one too. You don't just kind of have the schoolgirl, but you have to put it in a place that inspires and has elements that the West finds it interesting. So I think the example that I had was Lingy had the schoolgirl with archery in like a weird, desolate world and urban environment, all these different things. That's where a lot of the Western perspective likes that adventure, likes that independence, and likes that mystery. And so you have to combine a bunch of these things to make it palatable for both cultures. I personally love mecha and all the giant robots, but Japan is not doing a lot of those these days. So I don't know why. I'm really disappointed.
好，那最后一个问题，有没有要发问？好，
不好意思，我可以讲中文吗？
可以，可是我回答的话可能会讲英文哦，不好意思。
没事，我不确定我用英文讲流不流利。我想问的是，你觉得东西方的那个 audience 的差别
？I think this is tricky. You know, each culture has different takes. So I think it's tricky because even Japan and Taiwan have different interests. And even Korea has different interests.
Let's say so American versus Taiwan.
So if we say America versus Taiwan, America is very much into action, like action hero type. I mean, you can see it from Avengers and movies, you know, that kind of stuff it really resonates. What's that?
Marvel.
Yeah, Marvel, exactly. Marvel movies those kind of, and Star Wars is a big one as well too, right? And you can see with Star Wars Mandalorian is the idea of this like somebody who's an underdog can become somebody great, but it's not cute. Cute is not a thing in America. Like cute, no, even the girls, even the opposing, like the next gender and the girl gender and the woman gender and the male, they're handsome or they're beautiful. The cute is not a thing. in America. Versus Taiwan, I think Taiwan love cutesy things because that's inspired a lot by Japan. And so I think you have to figure out how to do that balance if you want to try and share some similarities between the two.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
好，那谢谢思凯今天替我们带来的这个演说。好，谢谢思凯。那下一位呢，我们请到 Neon Doctrine 的 CEO 住在台湾的 Ian Garner。那 Yeah, Ian, it's your turn. So if you want to use my slide, then you just put the next one.
Oh, okay. Okay,
Yep.
sure. Can I steal that? Okay.
You need to use the microphone.
The microphone, okay. Is it okay to take off my mask while I'm up here? Thank you. Okay, hello everybody. How are you today? Wonderful. Give me 1 second to pull up the PowerPoint on my laptop. I was far too busy taking notes from the last speech. That was really interesting. Okay. So hi everyone, my name's Ian and I'm here to talk to you about the roles and responsibilities of an indie publisher in modern times. The reason why I wanted to do this talk is because, especially in this region, there's a lot of misunderstandings about the role of a publisher, and also the role of a publisher is nowadays much different than what it used to be. So a lot of people have certain ideas that I want to talk about and express why those might be outdated. So before I go any further, I need to press it on this as well. Hey. So before I go any further, I should introduce Neon Doctrine. So Neon Doctrine brings diverse experiences from around the world to a vibrant community of players by partnering with new and dynamic existing creatives to create solutions to development, publishing, and marketing. That basically means we like to work with developers from this region, and we like to make their games successes worldwide. A really good example of this is The Legend of Tianding. Did anyone see The Legend of Tianding? It's a Taiwanese cultural action game that's done really well on Steam. We launched it on Xbox Games Pass 2 weeks ago, and it's just phenomenal. I feel very privileged to have worked with such talented local developers, and I think it's amazing that we managed to get something so uniquely Taiwanese onto Games Pass, you know, where millions of people are able to see it, download it, and play it. I think that is really the encapsulation of what our mission statement is. So yeah, that's why I like to be here. That's what I like to do. So my name's Ian. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Neon Doctrine. We are based in Taipei. We are based in Da'an. So if you are ever, sorry, not Da'an anymore. We are now based in Nehu. So if you are ever in Nehu, say hello. We're very friendly. And I love to speak with local developers. I want to see your projects. If you want to pitch to me, talk to me, whatever, I'm very approachable, okay? So what is a publisher? This is a very complicated question because publishers come in so many different shapes and sizes. You have very small publishers, very big publishers. You have publishers like me, which are kind of in the middle. You have publishers like Devolver, which are kind of at the top. And then you have publishers like Leoful in Singapore, which are significantly smaller. It all depends on what you are looking for and what the publisher can provide. So it's very difficult to give a strong answer about what is a publisher. The best way to describe a publisher is that we are a partner, that we work with existing developers and existing projects, and we help to bring those projects to a worldwide audience. So we're not your boss, we're not in control, but we are your partner. which means that we are a part of discussions, we're a part of lots of different things. So one of the things I often hear about is what people have misconceptions about what a publisher is. So first of all, I want to talk about some of these. So publishers are not dumb money. Do you know what dumb money is? Okay, dumb money is when you go to an investor. That investor can be a venture capitalist, or it can be your mum, and you say, give me money to make my game, and they say, okay, here's the money. They don't ask any questions, they're not involved, they just give you the money, and then they take that money back, usually make some money as well later on. We somewhat rudely call this dumb money, okay? Publishers are not dumb money. If you are just looking for money, then a publisher should not be your first port of call, because a publisher will be involved in much more than just that. The other thing is publishers are not the enemy. One of the sad things about being a publisher is everyone assumes I am evil. The general perception of games publishers is that we are trying to squeeze money out of poor developers. This is not true. We are not against developers. We are the partners for developers. I think one thing that you have to remember, especially in the age of social media, is that you always hear the bad news. So when you hear about publishers doing bad things, when you hear about terrible things happening, which does happen, you don't hear about all the publishing contracts that go well. Those just happen. The vast majority of publishing contracts go well, okay? Doesn't mean that every game makes money, but it usually means that nobody comes out of it feeling that they were cheated or disrespected. And the other thing is that publishers are not a guarantee to success. I wish I could stand in front of you and say, if you publish your game with me, it will make money. But I can't. It doesn't work that way. Every publisher of every size has published games that lose money. Every publisher, whether it's Devolver, whether it's EA, whether it's Ubisoft, we've all had that experience. It sucks, but it does happen. So it's really important to remember what publishers are not before you start a conversation with them, because going into it with a misconception can cause problems that sometimes occur later on. So, wait, did I miss a slide? Oh, there we go. Oh, I thought there was another one about what we are. Never mind. So we're going to go through the usual roles of a publisher. So the thing that every indie developer is interested in is funding, right? Yes, everyone wants to, yes, there's a few people who are nodding like this, yes. Everyone wants to know about the funding. So publishers do frequently provide funding to developers to help them complete their game. Occasionally, publishers fund an entire game, but that is becoming rarer and rarer, especially at the kind of mid-level publishers. This is usually because we are putting money on younger studios, first-time studios, young people who are kind of finding their way in the industry. So providing upfront funding to complete everything is usually not a risk that we are willing to take. This funding that we do provide is usually finishing funding. So people come to us with a vertical slice or a prototype. We evaluate that vertical slice or a prototype, and based on that, we decide whether or not we can fund the project. This funding is usually in the form of a minimum guarantee, often known as an MG. Does anyone know how an MG works? Okay, so a minimum guarantee is a guarantee of sales. So what I say to you is, you come to me and you say, hey, Ian, I need $200,000 to finish this project. I say, okay, I will give you a $200,000 minimum guarantee. What that means is I'm essentially giving you your sales up front. I believe this game will sell at least $200,000 worth of copies, so I prepay it. And then when we launch the game, I will take that $200,000 first. Now, there's lots of negotiations that can be done on this point. You can have it so that maybe the publisher doesn't take 100%. We never take 100%, but some publishers do. But it's important to be aware of, what it is. It's very, very rarely are publishers going to give you free money. They will always want to take that money back because it's a part of the business model. Like I said, recoup terms are very different depending on the publisher and are something that first-time developers need to pay close attention to. In some cases, I've seen minimum guarantees may be up to 150%. So for example, if we go back to, I give you $200,000, well, I will take 100% of the profit until I make $300,000. That's a very wonderful deal for the publisher, but it's not a very wonderful deal for the developer. So you need to be aware of minimum guarantees and how they function, because this is something that is very easy to misunderstand and can often lead to confusion and pain if misunderstood. Marketing. One of the main roles of a publisher is to create and execute a marketing plan based on the game. And this can come in many different forms depending on what your game is, what your talent pool is, and what abilities you have internally. The vast, vast, vast majority of the games that we work with have little to no experience with marketing. So this is usually on the publisher. But every now and again, we will work with a game that has an experienced marketer on board. And then they will help and we will work together to market that game. And that will affect how much responsibility we need to take on and will affect terms, conditions, etc. So it's important to go into those discussions with a knowledge of your own readiness and abilities. One of the things that we do is we assist in the creation of high-quality marketing copy and text. This just basically means that we help you write your descriptions. So, for example, your Steam storefront. One of the things that is very common in this region is bad English on your Steam storefront. Very, very, very common. And it has such a massive negative influence on your game outside of your specific region. So we will always work with our developers to make sure that we are creating high quality descriptions of the game, because it's so, so, so important. The other thing is that we make really engaging storefronts. We don't just have text. So if you go to any Neon Doctrine Steam game, you will see we have GIFs, we have really beautiful trailers, we have excellent screenshots. We really curate that experience so that the players really understand what they are buying and it's appealing, engaging, and interesting for them. Perhaps the most difficult and expensive thing is creating trailers. And this is often something that I have to really explain to developers, because making a good trailer is very expensive. If you want a trailer that is going to really push to the next level, you're probably talking about $10,000 to $20,000 US to create a really powerful, impactful trailer. And this is something that a lot of game developers don't think about. One of my, I would say 50% of the time when I'm talking with developers about trailers, they say, don't worry, I can do it myself. I can do it myself. And 99.9%, you cannot. You absolutely cannot. And being aware of that, the costs involved, the labor, how intense it is really important. For example, some of the trailers that we've made sometimes take 1 to 3 months to create. So if you're talking about creating marketing assets and going through and doing a full launch, you're talking about months of work before you can even announce the game. So it's really important to take that into account when you're talking to a publisher. We also secure marketing support from key platforms. I'm sure you all watch Nintendo Indie Directs, right? The Indie Worlds. Like, you will notice that the vast majority of games in an indie world has a publisher, because the publisher is always the first person to call. The publisher has multiple titles. Nintendo has a relationship with them. It's easier for us to have those conversations with Nintendo than it is for a developer who maybe only releases a game every 3 to 5 years. A publisher will release a game usually every 3 to 6 months. So we have much more contact with those platforms. We build up those relationships with them. A great example of this is Legend of Tiending and Games Pass. We were able to secure that position, to secure that marketing, to secure that highlight, because we had an existing relationship with Xbox, which is very difficult for an individual developer to manage. Not impossible, but very difficult. And of course, the other one is to reach out to media and influencers to raise the game's profile. So that's when you're talking about IGN, Eurogamer, Bahamut, all of these places to have reviews and previews and highlight trailers, all this kind of stuff. And as you can tell, it's a huge amount of work. I have a marketing team of about 5 people, and this is what they do. This is their entire job. Just focusing on doing this type of thing. So a lot of times when developers think they can do the marketing, they just don't realize that being a programmer and a marketer is way too much work. The other thing is community. Community has become incredibly important over the last 5 to 10 years. Once upon a time, the internet was you view and you experience, but now you interact, right? I mean, that's Web 2, and we're now moving into Web 3, so I'm sure you know Web 2. That creates a huge amount of labor, because your customers want to interact with you, even before they are customers. Like, they don't want to subscribe to your Twitter and just read about your game. They want to ask you about your game. They want to join your community. They want to feel like they are a part of that process. That is very, very, very user intensive for you. Somebody needs to respond to those questions. Somebody needs to post the funny GIF. Somebody needs to be curating all the feedback that you're getting, organizing focus tests, etc. So this is part of what we do. We encourage our community to become early adopters. We have a community of roughly 12,000 people. So when you are bringing your game to us, we have 12,000 people that we can tell immediately. Not all of them will love your game, but some of them will. And those people become your early adopters. They become the people that love your game, talk about your game, share it on Twitter, on Facebook, hype up their friends, and become a part of your marketing strategy. And this takes years to build. It takes years to build and years to maintain. So going with a publisher means that you do plug into a pre-existing community as opposed to having to create your community from scratch. And that's a very big benefit, and one that is often overlooked. Now, as a publisher, I can and do provide developers with tools and guidance about how to create their own communities. But again, most developers are not in a position where they can or want to hire a community manager full-time. It's a big ask for a small studio, but it is becoming increasingly necessary. The other one is quality assurance. Quality assurance is, well, it's the bedrock of publishing. It is the unsung hero of publishing. It's why when you buy a Devolver game, you know it will work. When you buy a Devolver game, you know it will feel good. Do you know why you feel this way? It's because Devolver has a really good QA system. They check the game, they test it, they polish it, they iterate. They work with the developers to really, really bring the game up to scratch. And we try to do the same. So when you buy a Neon Doctrine game, might not be your favorite game in the world, but you know it will work. We have established that level of trust. And let's face it, if you are a Steam user, you have all had that experience where you buy a game that looks cool and it just doesn't work, right? The controller doesn't work, the screen settings don't work, your mouse and keyboard keys are messed up. These are the things that publishers can help you test and pick up on. I mean, a really good example is in our office, we have an Xbox 360 controller, a PlayStation controller, a PlayStation 3 controller, a PlayStation 4 and 5 controller, a 7-Eleven shitty Bluetooth controller, and we test all of them to make sure that they work, because a huge number of players on PC use a huge variety of controllers. If your game doesn't work with one of those controllers, you will see negative reviews coming very fast and very quickly, because you know that you are a small team and you can't support every controller in the world. Your players don't care. Your players don't care. They bought the game and they expect it to work. So this is why QA is so important. We use both internal and external QA, which I think is the norm nowadays. So we do it internally, but we also do it externally to make sure that we get as many eyeballs on each game as is possible. Focus testing. Focus testing is another really important part of being a publisher. Focus testing is when we check and make sure that what we think is actually correct. So if I love a game, I should make sure that other people love it too. I need to get other people to play the game, give us feedback, and tell us what they like and what they don't like about the game. This has been something that we've recently put a lot more time, effort, and energy into. It's very, very easy, and I speak from experience, to go, I like this game, therefore everyone will like this game. But that is not reality. And if you are like me and you love horror, slow, gory, violent, scary games, you realize that actually I'm not normal. I'm a bit weird. And if I assume everyone is like me, then I'm going to hit some kind of problem. So focus testing is a way for you to check your internal biases. And another one is platform negotiation. I touched on this earlier, but because publishers are in constant contact with platforms, with Steam, Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo, Stadia. We are always in those communications, talking with them, building up a portfolio, and we are able to have those conversations quicker and easier than most developers who are just starting. This is a huge part of game development that especially indie teams rarely have the capacity for. This is what I spend, I would say, approximately 50% of my personal time doing. I am constantly giving different platforms and different opportunities the information they need to evaluate and provide us opportunities for our games. It's a very, very, very important part of the job, but it's also pretty boring unless you're like me and you love talking about video games. So the people who want to create video games usually really don't like this side of things. They like to create. You're very lucky in that I'm not a creative person. I just like to talk about how awesome your creation is. And that's a strength of a publisher. Having somebody that's willing to do the less interesting legwork. Localization. I don't know if any of you attended TGDF, but I did a whole speech on localization last year. Localization is incredibly important. The previous talk was all about how pop culture and cultural touchstones can work worldwide and do need to be treated carefully, right? You can't just copy everything from Taiwan and do everything in a Taiwanese way and expect it to work in the West, right? It's exactly the same with localization. Localization is an art. Good localizers are incredibly rare and quite expensive and worth every penny. The number of excellent Asian games I have seen underperform because they have bad localization is unbelievable. Unbelievable. Which is why one of the things that we took seriously from the very, very beginning was localization. Initially, we worked bringing games from the West to the East. That was my first business model. We helped localize games for the Chinese market. And we made sure that we had excellent Chinese localizers. Because Western jokes don't work in Chinese. You need to have somebody who can not just translate, but actually make it funny. I had a very good conversation with somebody about this in Japanese a few weeks ago, where they talked about how they had a very rude joke in their game and how difficult it was to get that rude joke to work in English and Japanese. But because they had an excellent localization team, they were able to do it. It was a totally different joke. By the end of that process, the joke was not the same, but it was still funny and it was still rude. So it still gave you that character. You knew that character was a bit ha-ha-ha and also a bit huangse. But it was a totally different joke because the localizer took it seriously and was able to write a whole new joke. And that is what localization is. It is not translation. Translation and localization are different things. Translation is making something understood. Localization is customizing it for that culture. With Legend of Tianding, we worked really hard on localization because there were certain things that just did not work cross-cultural. There were certain things that people did not understand. It took a lot of work to make it so that everybody could understand and appreciate that title. And it's incredibly important. And I would say, out of all the things I've spoken about, it's the thing that's the biggest issue in this region, and that is that people tend not to take localization as seriously as they need to. Development support. Now, this is something that not every publisher offers. This is something that we offer, but not everyone does. Development support is literally support for the development process. So again, I'm going to go back to the Legend of Tianding. My team made the Xbox version. We took the PC version, we worked with the developers, but we ported it to Xbox. And we ported it to PlayStation, and I think we ported it to Switch as well. And that's something that is becoming more and more normal as things go forward. For a first-time indie developer, porting to a console is very difficult. Has anyone here ever put a game on PlayStation, Switch, or Xbox? Anybody? Is it fun? It's not fun, is it? Yeah, it's a fucking nightmare. So doing it the first time is really, really, really difficult. My team has done it 10, 20 times now. So we can just do it. We can just do it. But for you, your first time, I bet it took you a while, right? Yeah, it did. Yeah, it did. So this is something that a lot of publishers are beginning to do now. We want to have the games on as many platforms as possible, but to do that, we need to support that process. But this will change the way the contract works. If I am just publishing your game and doing marketing, localization, etc., then I'm probably going to take an X percentage of a revenue cut. But if I'm also doing development, it's going to become a Y. Those numbers are going to change. So it's important to kind of go in there with the knowledge that the more labor the publisher has to do, the more they are going to negotiate for. It's just important to be aware of these things. Oh, that's basically what I just talked about. The final thing is lifecycle management. Lifecycle management is a fancy term for what happens after a game's launch. Now, out of interest, how many of you have released a game? Okay, just a few people over here. When you released the game, did you want to keep working on that game, or did you want to move on to the next game? Next game? Yeah. The vast majority of developers, when they finish their game, they want to move on to the next one because they've been working on it for 3, 4, 5 years, and by the time they're finished, they hate it. They never want to look at it again. They're done. And that's very understandable. So what a publisher can do is we can manage that game after you have released it. Now that can mean many different things. For most games, it means managing the sales, managing the discounts, putting it on different platforms, doing bundles, exploring retail opportunities. But for some, it means actually creating new DLC. It means creating new marketing beats. It means cross-promoting with different games. So, for example, with some games that we've launched that have similarities with other games from other publishers, we bundled them together and we sold it together. So, for example, Vigil: The Longest Night, our friends at Akupara Games, an American publisher, they released a game called Grime, which is very similar. So we put them together and we sold them, and our sales went whew, because people were like, oh, I like this game, I will buy this game at the same time for a discount. And it was a very easy sell. And it worked out for everybody. But you need somebody to manage that stuff, and it takes time, and it's usually something that developers are not so interested in doing. The final thing is problem solving and crisis management. When it all goes wrong, and it will go wrong, you have somebody to help you. This can be anything. You know, it can be your lead developer gets sick and can't come to work, so you need some help to source a new developer. Or it can be the internet in your country goes down and you need support to get some kind of mobile network set up that you can run your company from. Or it can be COVID-19 hit your studio and you have been unable to work. If you have a publisher, you have someone to ask for help. And this is something that I've done a lot. Managing problems that people didn't expect, being the partner and the friend when you need it. This is something that having a partner is difficult to express how important it is. My goal is always to release the best game possible. And that sometimes requires flexibility. So that's the last thing that we... there we go. I'm pressing the wrong button. Brilliant. So I want to talk a little bit about publishers' responsibility to a developer. This is a summary. Of course, it's impossible to summarize the relationship in only one slide. But I think this is something that if you are a developer and you are signing with a publisher, these are the things that you should request and you should get. So if you are asking for these things and you are not getting these things, then that is a question mark, okay? So a clear and comprehensive contract. Now, I speak a lot about contracts because contracts are very, 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 very important. A short contract is not a good contract. An easy little contract is not a good contract. You want a contract that is clear, that explains everything that you need to know, and which has preparations for everything. Okay? So you want to know what happens if you are late on a milestone. You say, Ian, I'm going to have the game ready to deliver on this date, but suddenly you know you can't do it. You need to know what will happen. Some publishers will take money from you. Some publishers will take additional recoup from you. Some publishers will do nothing. So it's really, really important for you to understand not only what will happen when things go right, but what will happen when things go wrong. Okay? Another one is transparency on financial matters. This is something that I've been pushing for years. Many publishers are not very transparent about this, and no one has ever been able to convince me why. I do not think you should have to wait 3 months to find out your sales. I don't think there's any reason to do that. I believe that we can have a system that you can see your sales monthly and hopefully in most platforms daily. This is something that I'm working with constantly to push forward because finances are important. You need to know if you're going to have enough money at the end of the month to pay your staff. So, very, very important. Transparency when dealing with partners and pursuing opportunities. I always keep my partners up to date with what I'm doing. The minute I have something exciting, I tell them. We talk about it and we make decisions together. I don't do things with my partners that they don't agree to. We make our best efforts to maximize the success of the game. That's really important, and it is not something that all publishers do. Some publishers will sign many games, and then will pick 1 or 2 to focus on. This means that you run the risk of being one of those games that they don't focus on. So it's really important that if that is the case, you understand it. And to work with our developers to solve problems in crisis, not to work against them. If you make a mistake, it shouldn't be me trying to squeeze money out of you. It should be me trying to figure out how to fix that problem. It doesn't mean that we will always get along. The publisher-developer relationship is complicated, and sometimes we will have differing opinions, but it's important that we have a framework to work within. It's important that we both have safety. But developers also have a responsibility to the publisher. And this is really, really, really important. Number 1 is be honest and forthright with regards to development progress. If you think you are behind and you aren't going to make the date, tell me as soon as possible. If you come to me 2 months before a milestone and you say, Ian, it's December, but in February we have a milestone and we're not going to make it, I'm going to go, okay, let's figure this out. How do we fix this? If you come to me 2 days before the milestone and you say, sorry, we're not ready, I'm going to be pissed off. So it's really important for you to also be honest and upfront with your publisher. The other thing is be realistic. And I have 2 points here in terms of budgeting and time management. One of the things that I very often see with indie developers is that they are not realistic in terms of time budgeting. So, for example, you are a new team, you are fresh, you are excited, and you make a prototype, right? You and your team, you get up at 9 o'clock every morning and start working, and you work through till 11 o'clock every night to finish your prototype because you are so excited about this prototype. You work 13 hours a day because you love what you are doing. And it takes you 2 months to make your prototype. And then you go, okay, this took us 2 months, therefore the full game will take 1 year. No. You cannot base time management on a 2-month sprint because you cannot work like that for a year. You will die. And I have unfortunately seen this happen so many times where developers say, we based our time on our prototype and we just forgot that we need to sleep. Or we forgot that we have mum and dads that we need to take care of. We have children, we have friends, we have all of the social things that you need to do. It is incredibly important that you are very, very, very clear and realistic in terms of time management. And it's the same with budgeting. Don't base everything on the cheapest possible thing. If you say, oh, during the prototype, I only ate pao mien 3 times a day, and it cost me 200 NTD a day, you can't do that for a year. Again, you will die. So you need to put into your budget that you need to be able to live and to live comfortably. I don't want developers getting sick, burning out because they don't have enough money or they don't have enough time. But if you give me the incorrect information, all I can do is base my approximations on the information you give me. So it's really important that you are very, very, very clear about that. The other thing is to approach your publisher as a partner, not as your boss, not as your enemy. Okay? If you have a problem, talk to me about it. If you are concerned about something, talk to me about it. If you are worried, upset, talk to me about it. Every publisher that I work with regularly are genuinely nice people. If you have a problem, they want to fix it. They don't want to use it against you. If you have a problem, talk to us. And the last one is the most difficult one, especially for indie developers. Respond appropriately to constructive feedback. If I come to you and I say, hi, I think your game has a problem, it is not a declaration of war. I am not saying that your game is bad. I am not trying to upset or offend you, but I need to be honest with you. If I see a problem, then I need to talk with you and we need to address it. Sometimes addressing it is me telling you I think this doesn't work and you telling me, oh, I'm sorry, I disagree. And then me saying, okay, let's test it. Let's focus test it. Let's find out. Let's get some data. Okay? It's very rarely I tell you it doesn't work. You say, oh, I like it. And I say, no. It's usually a conversation. Okay? But it's really important to handle feedback correctly. Especially for indie developers who your game is your baby, it's sometimes very difficult to hear that your baby is ugly. But some babies are ugly. And that's it. So if you have any questions, now would be a good time to ask them. But also, if you are not comfortable asking questions publicly, my Twitter handle is at the bottom, and I always respond. I'm a social media addict. It's a problem. So I will always respond to your questions on social media. Any questions?
好，这边先。
What's the differences between QA, initially QA and essentially QA?
I do not understand the question. Oh,
internal and external QA.
Sure.
What's the difference?
So internally, so I have 2 QA people internally, and what they do is they generally will do a really deep dive into your game mechanics. So they will look at the game and they will say, this works, this doesn't work, this quest design is too confusing, this combat mechanic isn't smooth enough, things like that. That's our internal QA. Our external QA is essentially bug hunters. So we will get 100 or 200 hours of people just sitting and trying to break the game. So it's both QA, but very different angles.
可以说中文，可以说中文，可以讲中文。不好意思，我突然忘记我问题了。我等下再问。Sorry。好，
那没问题。
Hello, Ian. Great talk, and thank you very much for all the effort you you do for the Taiwanese game dev community. Okay, my name is Rudy, and as you mentioned, there is the responsibility from developer to publisher. As a publisher, based on your own experience, do you need to check if this might be controversial? Do you need to check if the developer is being honest, or maybe the developer doesn't really know about how to determine their budget and the time management, and how do you approach to them, and how do you suggest the developer to react on that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yes, so as a publisher now, I'm pretty good at being able to look at a pitch document and telling when it's wrong. Like, I have a good understanding of how much things cost, so when it's totally wrong, I can tell pretty quickly at this point. But I'm nice. So if something is wrong, I will tell you it's wrong, and I will tell you to go fix it before I present it to my partners. There are other publishers out there that are not nice, and they will take your word at value, and they will punish you if you don't make it. So it really depends on who you are talking to. But in the end, it's really important for the developer to research that and to really dig into it. There's a lot of really good talks on GDC and Gamescom about budgeting for games. It's something that you need to do.
I actually have tons of questions, but just let others maybe.
Well, you can tweet me. You can tweet me.
I will.
Hi, I want to ask, based on your experience, what are some of the most common mistakes you saw in the first-time indie developer, and what's your recommendation for them to avoid those mistakes?
The biggest mistake is usually overconfidence. Overconfidence in time management, budget, and also sales. So I very frequently get somebody come to me with a pitch that will say, we have a game that's just like Cult of the Lamb. So we think it will sell the same as Cult of the Lamb. Or we have a game that is really like Fortnite. So we think Fortnite is a good comparative. And this isn't correct. I think one of the things that you need to do is not just look at the games like your game that succeeds, but look at the games like your game that fails. And try and figure out what those failure points are and how to avoid them as much as how to aspire to be the successful game. I definitely think overconfidence is the biggest one, especially for first-time studios. Because usually first-time indie studios are young people in their 20s. And young people in their 20s are very happy people. I remember that. I'm not that anymore.
Thank you.
Hello, Ian.
Hello.
我是 Chris， 然后谢谢很精彩的分享。那我这边有一个问题，就是想问一下，如果身为一个独立游戏团队，那我们要跟你们这些发行商接触的时候，好，那应该是什么样的阶段，或是我们要做好什么样的准备，然后去找发行商，会是比较合适的。以你们发行商的经验来看，谢谢。
That's a really good question as well. Nowadays, most publishers want to see something playable. So I would say if you don't have anything playable, don't pitch, because people will just respond to you and say, I need something playable. What you want to make sure is that whatever your core mechanic is, it needs to feel good. The biggest mistake I see is that people will have a game with a core mechanic, whether that's combat or platforming, but that core mechanic in the early stage doesn't feel good. So if you're telling me this game is amazing, it has this unique grapple hook attack mechanic, I want to see that and feel that it's good. So even if your game is nowhere near finished, even if the art isn't quite ready or anything like that, you need to be able to show me that your hook works. The other thing is I need you to show me what the game will look like. A lot of times I get a pitch and it says, this art is nothing like what the game will look like. And I go, then what the fuck does it look like? Because I can't see it. So that's why concept artists exist. Like, you know, there is literally a job for this. If you have a vision that you can't put into your game yet, you still need to show me that vision. Because if you can't show me that vision, how am I supposed to know what it is? No problem.
What? Sorry. Did you ever suggest developers to change their developing engines?
I don't think I've ever suggested it. I've told developers they need to upgrade it before, because I think more than once, you know, people have pitched to me and they've said, oh, we're using Unity 2016. And I go, well, that's nice, but it won't work. So there's been a couple of times where I've told developers they need to update, but I've never told a developer they need to change engine. I've definitely suggested that it might be a good idea to have a look at a different engine, but I would never feel confident in myself to tell a developer they've chosen the wrong engine. Though that's not my role.
好，那我们在最后3个。稍等一下。
Hi Ian, yeah, thanks for your speaking, and I'm Uni. I'm I'm occurring like how do we predict our about like selling or our time budgets or even our funds, and because it's hard to predict for we are new in this indie game developing, and will publisher help by some tools, or how do we occur to predict it?
Honestly, we can't help, and I'll explain why. I get about 30 games pitches a week. So if I were to go through each one of those pitches and fix their mistakes with budgeting, I would not be publishing any games. So we can't help you with that. We can tell you when you've got it wrong, but like I said, you're taking a risk there. It's up to yourselves. That information is out there. There are numerous websites that give the information that you're looking for. There's SteamDB, there's Steam 420, there's Toge Productions has a really good tool that I can't remember the name of, but it estimates sales based on region. And all you do is type in the Steam ID and it tells you an estimate of regional sales based on review numbers. It's brilliant. All of these tools exist for you. They usually exist in English, which does create a difficulty for Taiwanese developers, which I'm very sympathetic to. But a publisher unfortunately can't do your budgeting for you. If I could, I would. I just can't. Does that answer your question?
Okay, hello.
Hello.
谢谢你的分享。那我想要询问一下，在本地化的部分，就是对游戏推广来说非常重要。我们想知道如何可以找到适合的本地化合作伙伴，以及在游戏上线前怎么评估他们的本地化成果是否合乎该区域。谢谢。
That's a brilliant question. So I have a couple of different methods that I use, but the simplest method was I went on Steam and I looked for Western games that had been localized into the languages that I liked. I then went onto Steam, changed my language to the target language, and read the reviews. If the localization is bad, you will see it immediately. If the localization is good, you will also see it immediately. I then contact those developers and I say, hey, who did your localization in language X? And they tell me. And that's how I built up a list of trusted localizers, just by asking people. The good thing about the game dev community is that we're generally pretty open. We're happy to share information. There isn't this like super competitive, fuck you, my secrets. We're generally pretty happy to help each other out. So don't be afraid to ask. Does that answer your question? Yeah, perfect.
那我们开放最后一个问题 ，the last one.
Last question. Dun dun dun.
我想问一下，是选择 QA 的条件有什么？
Criteria selecting QA. What do you mean by selecting QA?
选择外部和内部 QA 的，就是什么时候我知道要用外部，什么时候我要用内部的 QA。
Great question. So we do internal QA earlier. So internal QA is our first thing that we do. So once we get that first vertical slice or prototype build, we will do internal QA on that. And then every milestone, a milestone is a agreed upon point between a publisher and the developer, which usually unlocks funds. So for example, you will say to me, Ian, at World 1, I will give you World 1 in February, and I will say, okay, when we get World 1, we test it, we okay it, I will give you money. So I will cut the money up, and I will just give it to you in milestones. So when you give me World 1, I will do internal QA and tell you whether I think it's acceptable or unacceptable, and then we will move forward from that. Sorry, 1 second. Later on in the process, I will ask you for a full version of the game. Maybe not a full version, but something that includes a large amount of playable areas. So maybe World 1, World 2, World 3. At that point, I will bring in external QA, and they will start looking for all of the little things that are broken. So it's initially, I'm making sure that the game runs and I'm happy with the quality of it, and then I will move on to more detailed QA that's done externally. Does that make sense? Perfect.
Okay.
No problem at all. Yeah.
Okay, so Ian, please keep on stage. 因为我们很久没有看到实体的讲师出现了，所以想说，对，请他跟我们一起合照一下。那我们现在邀请那个资策会的林嘉锦总监，然后创梦的傅慧娟总经理，还有资策会的方杰组长，我们一起上台拍个照，这样子。So let's have a group photo.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
好，那个最后一位讲师 Lisa 也久等了。Lisa 是香港 Cool App 的总经理。那 Lisa 会跟我们分享一下她在平台这边的一些见解，然后分享如何去增加你的客户这样子。好，那 Lisa 已经在线上了，那我们就把Lisa 要不要开一下镜头 ？OK， 好，谢谢。嗨
，Hello。
因为我跟各位分享一下，就是这一次我跟很多游戏界的朋友提供这个活动的资讯，每个人都告诉我说找 Lisa 就对了，就是 Lisa 是最适合的一个 speaker 这样子。好，那我们现在就让 Lisa 来分享。
好的，非常非常感谢。就像刚刚那个主持人说，就是上说的，就是现在实体的讲师或者是实体的分享已经非常非常难得了，然后就是很遗憾没有办法在面对面的这个能够感受到大家反馈的这种状态下去跟大家进行这次的分享。那就是退而求其次，只能我们在线上用一个文档的形式，然后来跟大家小小的分享一下我们作为这种比较综合性的商店媒体社群的一个角度。那首先也是感谢数位发展部资策会来给我这个邀请。那我们今天刚刚已经听完了2位其他的讲师的分享，其实是有一个前提的。那这个前提是说，我们独立游戏都是需要发行商来给我们去助力扩大我们的推销或者是行销的这个成效。那但是呢，据我所知，或者说据我感知到的，其实有很多的时候，我们是在等待或者是在洽谈发行商的。那在洽谈发行商的过程中， 我们是不是要守株待兔，或者说就是坐以待毙，在等待这一天的到来呢？其实不是的，就像我们说，其实很多事情都是成本，那这个等待的成本也是非常可观的。那今天我跟大家分享的角度呢，其实就是有这样的一个前提，就是我们不分享跟发行商相关的事情，我们也不分享付费的手段，我们只分享免费的用户的一些获取的途径是怎么来的。首先我自己呢是做了。不好意思啊，我自己呢是做了产品经理，做了很多年。那我做过平台化的产品，包括金融的交易平台。
Lisa， 不好意思，你的简报还没有放出来。
哎呦，不好意思啊。好的，现在有了吗？还没有吗？
正在出来 ，OK， 有了。
哦，抱歉，刚刚已经进入主题了。那对，先是介绍一下我自己啊，就是我自己做产品经理做了蛮多年的，然后接触的产品类型有包括像金融的交易平台，然后也做过社交的，就是在很久远的若干年前也做过交易那个社交类的游戏相关的普通的 lifestyle 相关的这些产品，然后等到移动互联网开始兴起的时候，那我们自己做游戏发行，然后做 social game 这些其实都有涉猎过。那直到在2015年左右呢，我们开始创办了 Cool App 这个品牌。那这个品牌最主要的产品，也就是我们现在在经营的这个游戏平台。自从做了 Cool App 之后呢，我们才开始有很多涉猎到海外的用户的获取，或者是说向海外拓展的这样的一个方向吧，就是这个领域。那所以说，今天大家可以把我们当成是一个国际化拓展的一个学长，或者是说一个先行一步的这个前辈。那我们有很多的经验，也更有很多的教训来跟大家分享。在过去的若干年里面，其实我不知道在场的朋友们有没有用过 Cool App 这个平台。那其实我们在很早，可能是刚刚上线的时候就已经开始了多语言的界面，然后在可能18、19年的时候，我们的这个多语言界面甚至达到10几种，包括法语啊、西语啊、泰语啊等等。那这个想法是来自于我们觉得就是游戏本身也是不分国界的，我们发现优质的游戏去推荐给大家，去匹配给爱好者，这个过程应该是直接就面向全球的。但是这个想法也给到我们一个教训吧，就是摊子铺得太大了，那实际上我们的 focus 就不会这么集中了。那这个也是说，今天我们现在的这个服务是很集中在中文、英文和西语这几个主要的语种上面。那Cool App 平台呢，现在大概有600、700万的每月的活跃用户，这样，然后我们的用户是分布在可能超过200个国家，就是每个国家都有一些用户来使用这样子。那所以说，全球化或者是面向海外的这个拓展，并不一定是总是定向的。这个定向的是指说，并不一定是我们主动想要去拓展到某一个国家或者地区，而有可能是我们的游戏吸引到了哪些用户，那我们会有可能被动的为了这些 用户或者是玩家去进行一个进化和调整。那这个是我们酷爱平台分享给大家的第一个点，就是我们的国际市场的拓展不一定是我们自己最初一厢情愿的，比如说我们想去做北美，我们想去做日本这样子，那它跟在地的这个用户和在地的玩家的喜好，其实都是有一个天然的属性的结合的。好，这个是我们在各地，包括在法国啊、美国啊去出展的一个情况。那今天的分享呢，其实后边我会有2个重点。第一个重点呢，是从一个小的切入口，就是玩家到底怎么样去发现游戏的这个数据吧，和我们得到的一些结论去跟大家探讨一下。第二个呢，是我们在自己的经验上面，就是以我们自己的形态上面不同的角度跟大家提的一些行销方面的一些建议。那先来讲第一个的话呢，就是当用户在市场上茫茫的游戏的海洋，茫茫的 App 的海洋，他们是怎么去看到一款游戏的？我这里讲的还是以手机游戏为主啊，因为我们毕竟在手机游戏方面的这个数据是更准确一些。那其他的平台上面呢，我们也会具有一些参考性。那等一下跟大家就是带到一下。那手机游戏的发现或者是说发掘吧，是一个什么样的渠道或者方式？大家看到这个问题，可能心中会有一些答案。那这里很难互动啊，这里很难互动，也不知道大家有没有举手或者这样。那我就直接把这个我们的答案分享给大家啊。这个数据是怎么来的呢？其实它是来源于我们每2年1度有一个大型的用户调查。那这个用户调查基本上都会有1万到2万用户进行参与，所以这个数据的样本呢是相对的具有一个代表性的。而且这个用户调查呢，我们是有纵向的比较的，也就是说，等一下我们能看到2022年的数据，也能看到2020年的数据。那再早一点的我就没有再摘录在这里了。那大家可以看到，其实浏览应用商店仍然是占据在非常非常主要的一个位置上面，然后其次是比较平等的一些渠道，就是一些方式，可能是我们看到KOL 或者是 influencer 的一些推荐，也可能是来自于我们身边的好朋友或者是其他的玩家的群组的一些推荐，然后再是更加官方的，比如说像游戏媒体啊，比如说像是官方的这种SNS 啊，甚至是广告啊等等，其实这些是相对还没有那么具有影响力的一些方式。当我们再把这个数据继续细分的时候呢，其实会发现应用商店的这个主导地位，它并不仅仅是存在于我们自己的市场上啊，就是港台的市场，乃至于华语的市场，并不只是这样的。我们区分了海外和华语区的结果，其实看到这个占比的程度是类似的，甚至海外的这个占比更高。那么也就是说，当我们玩家主动去寻求一个游戏的资讯的时候，仍然会去看，或者仍然去依赖开发者直接提供给玩家的这个最一手、最直接的这个解读吧，那么接下来他才会去依赖其他的二手的资讯，就是二手的资讯是指我的朋友的评价，我的influencer 的评价等等，乃至于游戏媒体的评价。 那么这个趋势是不是一直都是这样的呢？我们发现是的，因为这一张前面我为了区别一下啊，那刚才的这一张呢是最新2022年的数据，那么这一张是截取了2年前2020年的数据，大家会发现其实这个占比是没有发生太大的变化的，仍然是商店是最主要的一个影响因素。那么接下来的影响因素，就第二重要的类型的影响因素，也是我的朋友们啊，这个推荐。但是我们会发现，哎，在更早一点的时候，其实广告的占比是相对比较高的，反而到今年的话呢，广告的这种影响力是体现出一个下降，而 YouTuber 或者是UP 主或者是 VTuber 他们的这些推荐的程度，会在今年的这个结果里显示出来一个更主要的一个影响力。刚才也说了，我们今天跟大家分享的一些因素，其实都是以免费的为主。那么我们看一下上面提到的这些渠道里面，其实哪些是免费的，或者是哪些有免费的机会，哪些有我们作为开发者有操作的空间吧，就是有主动进行影响和操作的空间的。其实我们发现是占超过70%的，甚至是说，其实在除了广告以外的渠道，我们都有可以努力自主的去影响玩家的一些空间和弹性。那再进一步的去了解，当我们看到一款手机游戏了，那刚刚第一个指的是我们通过哪些方式和途径能够看到一款游戏嘛？那接下来呢，就是在看到一款游戏之后，我们哪一些内容的形式、形态更容易让我们去消化和理解这个游戏？那大家可能看到这个结果，就会发现游戏的图片和简介，其实这仍然是指App Store 里面的，甚至于试玩的影片，我们其实也是可以通过官方主动的一些分享的方式，或者是我们去跟influencer 的一个合作去传递到给玩家的。反而很多我们认为深度的一些剖析吧，比如说我们说这个深度测评，或者是说我们的采访啊等等，其实未必是现在的玩家最愿意去了解的，因为这样的时间成本和理解成本它其实是提升了的。那么这个趋势在2年前是不是一致的呢？我们发现也是类似的。我看到很多朋友在拍照，其实可以不用着急拍，因为我们是有完整的报告可以 share 给大家的。那在我最后一张 slide 有一个登记那个大家邮箱的一个表，那等一下大家把那一张拍出来就可以了。对，回到我们的分享的结果里面去，那就是说，其实呢，我们自己开发者自己，能够凝练的、简洁的，和清晰的去表达自己游戏的这种内容的形态，图文 video 仍然是非常非常重要的，仍然是可以传达给玩家，并且影响到玩家的。刚刚也说了，就是其实我们的数据会比较偏向手机游戏的这种形式，然后我们的玩家也主要都是手机玩家，但是他们对 PC 游戏或者说我们现在独立游戏基本上都是 Steam 上架比较为主嘛。那么他们对 PC 游戏到底有没有参考性呢？我们发现也是有的，因为在我们的这些调查里面，我们同时也会问你到底是不是一个PC 游戏玩家，你是不是一个主机游戏玩家？那我们发现其实手机游戏玩家，尤其是重度的手机游戏玩家，他同时也是 PC 游戏的比率会非常高，但是同时是console game 的玩家的话呢，这种比例就会大大的下降了。所以说这个结果，我们相信对 PC 游戏的开发者来说也是有参考性的，是有借鉴的意义的。OK， 那这个就是我们这个刚刚说到的这个用户调查的一个历史，其实是从16年开始，就每隔1年都会做一次。那么每年的抽样的样本大概是一半是中文的，一半是英文的，每一个大概都有1万以上的这个玩家来参与这个调查。所以说这个调查呢是我们通过记录，就是在时间上记录一个玩家喜好和行为的变化，并且分享给开发者，去给到一个小小的建议和观察吧。OK，刚刚也说到，其实就是 Cool App 这个品牌呢，并不是第一天就是一个像我们这张图上看到的有多重身份或者是多种功能的一个产品。那第一天我们也是非常明确的，我们唯一明确的一点就是我们想要为玩家做点事情。那玩家喜欢什么？玩家需要什么？其实这个是我们在这个过程里面慢慢的发展和探索出来的，也是花了很多的时间去进化出来的。那今天的话呢，其实我们是一个结合了应用或者说游戏商店嘛，手机应用商店和玩家社群以及 ACG 媒体这样的一个3合1的形态。但是因为我们自己的受众用户的属性比较集中，那所以说我们每一件事情其实可以允许我们做的相对比较深入一点，但是呢是只为了这样的一个用户属性的玩家群体去服务的。假如我们说自己是一个 Google Play 一样的应用商店的话，其实我们就没有办法在同样的内容上面去都做的这么深。OK， 那下一页呢，可能大家可以截个图。在这3种不同的产品形态下，其实每一个产品形态它都有非常多的竞品也好，或者是我们说是现成的，在市场上已经有很大的市场占有率，或者是知名度，或者是深耕了很多年，有非常丰富的内容的产品存在了。那这样的情况下呢，我们自己找到的一个标签，或者是找到的一个特点吧，就是把这3个形态结合在一起。但是我们服务的人群是比较 niche 的，比较细分的一个市场。同样的建议其实是给到游戏开发者的。今天我们这里是有两个角度啊。第一个角度是在这3个形态上，其实我们都有涉猎嘛，所以我们从3个形态的这一方的出发点，会给到大家一点点建议。但与此同时呢，我们的这种自我定位，就是 Cool App 的这个自我定位，也同样是给到开发者一个借鉴，就是当我们去进行行销的定位和包装的时候，其实你的自我认知是非常重要的。你的自我认知也就决定了你面向的 TA， 你的目标客群是什么样的嘛。那最近我经常被同事们问到，就是不知道为什么这个现在人格测试或者性格测试 MBTI 的这个又火起来了。 那经常有人问你是哪一型的，那我自己作为一个30接近40的一个中年人了吧，我觉得这个是比较粗暴的一个简单粗暴的一个把大家去划分类型的一个维度。那么但是它仍然以我的记忆来说，10年前火过一次，5年前火过一次，今年好像又火了。那这是为什么呢？因为当我们去跟别人第一面建立联系，第一面去交流的时候，其实是需要一个 icebreaker 的，需要一个破冰的工具。那么人和人之间的交流需要这种破冰的工具，而我们的游戏面试的时候一样是需要一个 icebreaker 的。那这个 icebreaker 其实是要我们自己找到的，也就是说我们游戏上的这个标签是需要我们自己去找到的。当大家去进行开发的时候，我不知道大家是不是具有这样的一张 checklist 啊，就是这样的一个可能不是以真的纸面的形式列出来的，而是在大家的脑海中。我不知道大家有没有按照这样的逻辑去捋一遍，就是你和你的团队乃至和你的发行商，其实应该在这以下的事宜上面都达成一个共识。这个共识，首先第一个是我的这个游戏的自我定位。那这个自我定位可以是很新颖、很独特的，比如说我是一个日系风格的恐怖游戏，或者是我是一个中式风格的恐怖游戏等等。那么这个够不够独特，其实就意味着我们对自己的创新性和创造力的一个阐述嘛。但是就像刚刚其他的那个前面的一位导师有说有分享过，是大家可能是 overconfident 的一个点，是我们会过度的看到我们独特的一点，而不希望我们被包装和理解成为跟其他的游戏过于相似。那么这就来到了第二个了，就是标签这件事情。当我们自己的定位非常独特的时候，我们就会发现我很难用一句话去传达我自己到底是谁，我到底是一个什么样的游戏。那这样子其实就变相的去增加了理解的成本。所以为什么我非常建议大家先把左侧的这3个东西先列一下，就是定位、标签和关键字。它们的区别是什么呢？第一个定位是我独特的地方，是我与众不同的地方，独一无二的地方。但是标签却不是，标签是我的 stereotype 吧，标签是老套的，别人看待我，我不喜欢的，但是他就会说，哦，这是一款这是一款日式 RPG， 或者是说这是一款普通的 MMO， 或者是这是一款普通的什么样的游戏都可以了，就是大家可能能想象的，你最讨厌被别人评价的那一句话，可能就是你的标签。但是这个标签为什么重要呢？因为它是商店也好，媒体也好，玩家也好，初认识你的第一个 icebreaker。它不是你跟别人的差异，它是你跟别人的共性。找到这个标签之后，其实就是一个任务。这个任务衍生出我们要去给自己找关键字。虽然我们不进行广告投放啊，不进行 SEM 的这个广告投放，但是关键字其实就是帮助我们找到竞品和受众群的一个非常好的办法。也就是说，刚刚说的这些，我们游戏的类型、我们的竞品、我们的被别人看到的一些视觉风格的标签等等，其实都是我们去找目标用户的所在的一个方式。所以呢，当我们找到了自己的独特性，自己跟别人的共性，也找到了我们跟 这个市场上现有的目标用户群所在的地方之后，接下来这一些问题就会很容易得到解答。比如说我们的视觉风格会是怎么样的？那我们类似的视觉风格的游戏，类似视觉风格游戏的用户，他们分布在哪里？甚至于说，有的时候我们客群和风格的定义是会反过来决定我们到底去经营哪些平台的。比如说，如果我们是一个有教育意义的，就是有教育属性的游戏的话，那我们的经营平台很有可能是平板，而不是PC 或者是普通的手机端，因为平板是更适合这个教育的一个展示嘛，就是中小学生或者是幼稚园的小朋友他们的这个展示。那这样我们的开发的配饰的重点其实就会发生一些调整了。另外呢，当我们去明晰了这个定位之后，我们的定价方案乃至于行销方式都会发生一些调整。举个例子，如果我们目标的用户群是东南亚的一个主要就以东南亚为主要的市场的话，那我们的定价方案就不能定太高。我们的最低价格的那个产品就一定是我们最主要的一个收入来源，比如说0.99甚至0.99以下这个方式，是一些更小金额的礼包去做一个降低门槛的作用。所以如果在没有想明白前面这些这9个格格里面的事情的时候，我们贸然的去决定了一些经营的方式或者是营销的方式，其实很容易为后来我们再去调整资源的配置就造成一个大的影响。那刚才也说到说，这一个共识的 checklist 是希望大家在团队内部能够尽快、尽早的去形成共识的，同时呢，也是希望跟发行商在进行沟通和接洽之前，我们自己先脑海里有一个大概的框架。那假如我们有发行商的话，刚才这些问题，刚才这些定位，其实是我们要去沟通的。但是假如没有发行商的话，我们自己是要等着确定了发行商这一天才开始行销吗？那绝对相信大家也会得到这个答案，是我们绝对不是。那么行销的思路或者是行销概念的形成是什么时候建立呢？我是希望大家能够越早的建立越好，包括像这页所说的这个，我们的立项的第一天，我们在进行开发的第一天，我们写 code 的第一行 code 的那一天，其实就应该有一个对自己市场定位，对自己整个行销重点的一个构思吧。那接下来我们进入到建议的环节啊，可能大家刚刚也都记得，就是在游戏商店或者是应用商店这个角度上，其实玩家的受认程度仍然是非常高的，无论是图文也好，还是图文视频也好，其实都是我们自己经营的时候最可以去施加影响力的地方。那么以应用商店来说，我相信大家非常非常重视自己在应用商店上提交的信息，但是这里只提几个可能大家没有注意到的，或者是大家没有意识到的点，跟大家分享一下。那第一个呢，第一个问题可能是我们 日常碰到的商业性的游戏其实蛮多的。对于商业性的游戏的开发者来说，我们提醒的是，你不要用照片，你不要太过美化或者是货不对版的去推广你的游戏，对吧？可能大家经常在 Facebook 上的投放、Google 上的投放，都会看到很多小游戏玩法的广告素材，但是点进去了之后，其实跟它本质游戏的玩法一点关系都没有。那这个是我们要提醒商业化游戏去注意的一点，是不应该要货不对版的去吸引用户。但与此同时，我们也会提醒独立游戏开发者的是，我们的商店的图文素材也不能是一个半成品的状态，因为玩家其实是没有耐心去把怎么说没有耐心要深入的相处，才去主动的发现你的优势。如果你的最好的一面没有主动告诉给用户玩家的话，其实不太可能要依赖玩家自己去发现。所以最好的东西，我们是希望能够通过游戏商店的这些介绍的素材，第一眼最容易的方式就传递给目标用户的。那第二个可能大家没有注意到的点呢，是其实游戏商店比我们自己的官网，比我们自己的就是 Facebook SNS 也好，其实它有一个不能被取代的地方，就是其实他们是自己会做搜索引擎的优化的。也就是往往我们上了游戏商店之后，我们的在 Google 上的搜索结果是比我们自己官网做1年甚至2年要做的更好的。但是为什么呢？是因为本身这些官网这些商店它的权重就高，此外他们还会去做更多的针对搜索结果全站搜索结果的一个优化。那这个也是我们很建议，如果大家自己去做官网的话，不要忽略了在商店这个介绍页上面的一个这句话说错了，不好意思，是我们自己建立官网的话，不要忽略了在自己的官网上的这个游戏介绍的内容是要更有利于搜索结果的抓取的，就是更有利于 SEO 的。好的，刚刚我记得前面的一位讲者其实也有提到说游戏的 life cycle management 的这个概念。那其实呢 life cycle 呢，我们看来就在商店这个角度看来，其实是从你发布游戏第一条消息的那一天到你游戏停服的这整一个过程。所以如果我们能够尽早的把我们游戏的动态开发的过程和我们每一个 milestone 都能跟我们的目标用户乃至于跟发行商吧去同步，其实都是更有利于我们吸引目标用户和发行商的，就是无论是 to B 还是 to C 都是更有利的。那么我也建议大家一定要重视的是，一个是事前预约的环节，这是我们及早可以触达，无论是合作伙伴还是说我们的目标用户，都是一个更早的，就是把我们前置曝光的这么一个非常好的时间点。参与了预约的这个是从我们所有的商店的一个数据表明，所有参与预约的玩家，他的转化率首先是会更高的，然后他的付费率也是会更高的，并且他有机会成为你最早的这个influencer， 去影响口碑的推广。所以说预约的这一部分玩家一定是我们最重视的一个受众群。这个是 早于上线的这个环节。那么上线之后的这个环节，也是刚刚那位讲者有提到的说，我们的游戏虽然通常独立游戏有很多是并不是长久的，像是很多商业化手游其实是有把运营当做更重要的一部分，就是随着我们上线之后，定期去有新的内容提供给大家。独立游戏可能往往是以 DLC 的形态，或者是比较少的章节的更新的形态去维持这个运营，但是呢，我们仍然要非常建议大家在每一个更新上面都给到应用商店也好，给到我们自己的官网也好，一个足够细化的、足够有表达的一个内容吧。就这些内容其实就是我们跟玩家去更新我们这个 milestone 的一个非常重要的过程。有些开发者我们见到了啊，就是跟我们交流的有些开发者是默默的就把这个很大的一个更新就推出来了，而并不事前跟我们作为商店也好去进行沟通，作为媒体也好去进行沟通。那这种方式我们觉得是不建议的。就但凡你有大型的沟通，或者是你要进行上线了，都建议大家主动的去跟游戏商店进行一个沟通协调，因为很有可能这时候其他的商业游戏并没有在进行很大的推广的时候，我们就有机会获得平台的商店的这个资源去导流，带来自然流量了。那右侧这两个其实也是类似的逻辑，就是其实平台呢和商店呢都会有免费的资源的，只不过这个免费的资源在很多的时候是被更大的 IP 占领了，被更有预算的游戏去投放了。但是实际上，这样的资源在我们看来并不是专属于付费的广告主的，而它其实是平台推好内容。推荐合适的游戏给玩家的一个目的，所以并不是专给付费的广告主的。所以当我们对自己的内容有信心，对我们的更新是重视的，我们都很欢迎开发者来主动跟我们推荐自己的游戏。我们通常也会给到开发者的，比如说中间这个联合推广这种形态，其实是完全没有分到底是不是付费的广告主的，基本上都是上架的游戏，如果他们愿意去提供这些软性的推广内容，我们都会给到这个曝光的。这个应用部分，如果大家都能够理解和了解的话，那我就往下进行。好的，我相信大家都会很重视游戏商店嘛。刚刚的这个点可能会让大家有一种老生常谈的感觉，但是我们的分享呢，其实有很多是处在一个不一定叫对立啊，但是是一个换位思考的一个角度。那下面这个游戏媒体就更加是一个换位思考的角度了。很多的媒体，或者说绝大部分的媒体，其实都是希望开发者主动联系的，都是希望开发者主动能够提供一些素材啊，能提供一些内容的。所以首先第一个新闻稿我们就会非常的欢迎，但是怎么样能够提高新闻稿被发布的这个几率呢？所以我就建议大家还是要多多参考一下一般的游戏的新闻稿，比如说大家在巴哈上面去就搜一下自己同类的，或者是搜一下近期的游戏，他们的新闻稿是怎么写的。如果你没有写过的话，那么练习几篇也是好的。 而不要把自己的新闻稿的这种格式或者是说表达太过的特立独行，因为这样的话呢，每一个游戏的编辑，每一个媒体本身，他们都有自己发稿的一个逻辑或者是一个格式，越接近这个格式，他们去发布这个新闻稿的时间成本就会越低，那么他发布的意愿也会再优化一点，再强一点。所以这个是我们作为媒体这个角度换位思考，去提升一下发稿的这个意愿的一个小的技巧。然后包括在新闻稿里面不要有错别字呀，图文的简介一定是要准确的呀。然后到底这个新闻稿的主要内容是上线呢、预约呀，还是说一个重大更新呢？等等，其实都要在邮件里面比较清晰的列出来，等等，这些都是非常小的技巧。但是呢，我就非常建议大家先去换位思考，发给自己人去了解一下啊，就自己内部收到这封新闻稿之后，是不是能够把基础的信息、基本的信息都能 get 到？否则的话呢，真的是发到了媒体那里之后，如果这个内容不是很合适，或者是没有做到很 user friendly，那么你就浪费了一次直接 approach 媒体的一个机会。这个是新闻稿的一个方式。那么另外一个方式，我也比较建议的就是大家要打造自己的品牌吧。这个品牌并不是指游戏这个名字，而是指我这个开发团队。我认为做的比较好的，举个例子啊，比如说像哈利波特的有病的系列，那么其实大家会觉得有病是一个 IP， 是一个品牌吧，而不是说我一定是要玩哪一款游戏。只要 under 这个品牌 under 这个 IP， 其实对我们的 TA 来说都是有同样的吸引力的嘛。那如何让自己成为一个品牌？如何让自己的团队成为一个品牌？那我就很建议大家能够给媒体进行一些沟通或者是供稿吧。如果我们自己是有分享的意愿的、分享的习惯的，比如说我知道很多的开发者自己都有写开发的 blog， 那么这些 blog 的分享，我也很建议大家可以直接发给媒体，或者是把它稍微调整一下内容去分享，这样让自己不仅让自己的游戏成为大家眼前经常出现的一个名字，更加让我这个品牌啊，就我自己这个开发者和我自己这个开发团队，成为我们独立游戏界的一种代言的一个存在。那这样的一个供稿的关系，或者是这样的一个曝光吧，会让我们跟媒体都建立一个良好的长期的合作关系。那这个是我比较鼓励大家去做的。OK， 那后面游戏试玩呢，我相信如果大家是 Steam 的开发者的话，经常会去用到这个手段了，也不做多说了。展会曝光也是，相信随着疫情的好转，大家应该能够参与的展会是越来越多了，包括国际化的展会，像最近 TGS 也重新回到线下了，G-Star 也重新回到线下了，未来可能更多的东南亚的展会也都恢复了，欧美的展会也是。那我还是很希望大家如果有机会的话，去线下去参与这些展会的交流，一方面呢是更容易得到媒体的关注，另外一方面呢，跟不同地方的游戏的开发者，尤其是独立游戏的开发者的这个交流的紧密，也会给到我们在当地市场拓展一些更好的建议。OK，那最后一个 跟大家分享的是我们作为社群这一个经营者的角度吧。第一个及时客诉的处理呢，其实为什么没有放到游戏商店那个范畴底下呢？是我相信大家都会，就是作为玩家啊，大家都会觉得说，如果我对这个游戏很满意，我不会去商店下面，我不见得会去商店下面去写评论。但如果我对这个游戏非常不满，那我90%以上的可能性，我想要去分享我这个不满。所以说，其实呢，在游戏商店页面下的这些评论，不是我们的，不是我们要交流的地方，而是我们要处理的问题。而如果我们把玩家的评论当成一个交流的话，我们才会知道，才会觉得这是一个社群的经营，而不是客诉的处理。这两个的分别，可能大家要去就是咀嚼一下吧。我们如果只把它当成一个客诉的处理，那么处理完这个案例，甚至是说解决了这一个 bug， 解决了这个问题，那么这个事情就画上句号了。但如果我们把它当成是跟玩家的一次交流的话，我们就会发现，其实我跟这个玩家的这一次交流是会被许许多多，是会被所有其他的玩家看到的。那这个才是真正的这一个客诉的意义所在，就是其实我不仅是在对这一个玩家进行反馈、进行回应，而我是对所有的我的目标用户，所有的我的已经存在的玩家们在进行一个公开的回复。所以如果我们很明确，其实我并不是在处理一个问题，我是在通过这一个沟通来向广大的玩家去进行一个反馈，那么其实我们就能理解，这其实是一个玩家社群经营的问题，而不是一个客服的问题。同样的，刚刚说到重大的更新游戏的上线等等，其实这都是我们要去主动说话的时间点。这个主动说话，甚至包括我们的更新日志，我们每一次维护信息的一个发布，其实这都是我们去面向用户进行一次沟通的契机。每一个这个契机，其实都是在告诉我们，都是在告诉他们，我们是有用心在经营的，我们都是活着的，我们是健康的活着，或者说我们有在努力的。那这就是在进行玩家的内心的这个预期管理。实际上，当我们面对独立游戏的玩家的时候，大家给到我们的心理的宽容度是非常高的，比起商业游戏，大家的鼓励，大家的这种支持吧，其实都是比商业游戏要更高，更有耐心吧，也是更多的鼓励。那所以说，我们每一次的更新，我们每一次的发布，其实都是在跟玩家的一个对话。那这个对话，这个契机把握住，不要浪费掉吧，其实是我们非常建议的。至于态度的话呢，这个相信大家已经就是到底是什么语气啊，大家什么态度，这个绝对是个性化的去处理。那我唯一的建议就是，不要有小编这个角色，可能就像刚才说，开发者自己本身，如果我们是愿意去进行分享的话，那我们自己这个真实的身份就已经非常好了。我们自己真实的身份，我们自己真实的语气。跟大家的平等的交流、真实的互动，就已经能够让大家感觉到我们这种真诚。那这样的玩家的社群的经营，远比商业游戏那种某某 客服小编，或者是千篇一律的这个我已经收到您的信息了，然后感谢您真诚的建议，这样每一个玩家看到几乎都是一致的客服的一个回复，要有说服力的多，那对我们的心理上的宽容度也会高得多得多。下面这2幅截图其实是一些线下的例子了，但现在其实线下的例子呢，并不是这么的容易操作，尤其是当我们去推广海外的市场的时候，线下更是一个困难的程度。线下的困难程度一定是更高的。那么仅是给大家做一个参考。如果有线下的机会的话，也是非常鼓励大家能够参与的。比如说像今天这些，就是今天的这个论坛这样子。OK， 前面其实这些建议和意见呢，都是我们从自己的经验和跟开发者沟通的一些小的观察吧。那希望能够给大家一些参考，给到大家一点点启发。如果有的话，那就非常的荣幸了。最后这里呢是一个我们的服务类型的一个展示。那最主要的呢是我们现在有开发者中心，这里能够让大家直接的把自己的游戏上架到酷 Web 平台上面，让开发者直接能够接入大概30多种全球的各种各样的支付方式吧。那也是帮助大家降低上架各个不同地区商店的这样的一个门槛。那我知道大家肯定会去上最主流的这个像 Google Play 啊、App Store 啊这样的商店，但是我们的定位呢其实是补充性的，也就是说我们的用户一定已经是玩家了，那他会更懂你，也更懂游戏了。包括他们的这个支付的意愿、游玩的时间也都会比普通应用商店这样要来得好得多、强得多。所以这个是今天跟大家就是小小的卖一个广告了。那其他的服务可能是需要更深入的了解大家自己游戏的特性才能做出建议的。所以今天的建议呢，可能对有些听众来说是比较浅了。那希望接下来我们可以加联系方式去交流吧，或者是大家等一下提问来问。那刚刚也说到，就是最前面那一部分的报告的分享，其实是可以通过大家在左边的这个 QR code 登记一下信息，我们下周会发给大家这样子。然后我的联系方式呢也是列在了右边了，如果有兴趣的话，可以随时交流。
好，谢谢 Lisa。那我们现场大家的问题，那现场这边有没有人？好。
你好，我想请问 Lisa， 就是关于那个 KOL 跟 VTuber 的推广啊，因为现在网红非常的多，你们怎么去做选择跟评估？然后另外一点就是说，因为合作的方式有很多种，那你们都是透过什么样子的合作的模式，可以让推广的效益最大化？这样子，谢谢。
其实这个跟游戏本身的关系非常大。以我们自己为例啊，就我们的广告主或者是我们自己这种联运的游戏，就是我们开放平台某种程度上就是在联运这些游戏嘛。那我们会帮助在我们平台上接入了 SDK 的这些开发者去进行联合的推广。比如说，如果这些游戏它有特定的属性的话，那我们去找跟这个标签很接近的 VTuber、YouTuber 或者是 UP 主。就刚刚这一页，我是真的是希望大家要仔细的思考关于自己啊，就是我的定位是什么，我的标签是什么，我的关键字是什么。那如果这些东西是你自己能够很明确的，那你目标的推广渠道，你目标的KOL 其实他们身上也是有标签的，这个匹配度越高，效果一定是会越好的。那么另外一个呢，跟预算有关了，对吧？另外一个就是他们的规模。如果我们现在找的是标签很宽泛的，比如说它就是一个游戏的 KOL， 那么它的粉丝量、它的 followers 的这个 scale 一定是很大的，它的价码一定也是会很高的嘛。那跟我们的游戏、跟我们的目标用户的群体不见得是匹配的。相反，我找到一个标签重叠度更高的 KOL influencer， 那我的效果和预算可能都是在性价比更高的一个结果上面。而且这个也和竞争有关系了，就是如果我们找更受欢迎的最头部的 influencer 的话，跟我们一起去抢这个 influencer 的人，其实就是最头部的游戏嘛，那么他们的成效其实就是以怎么说，机会成本来定的嘛。influencer 他的同样的时间，同样做一次内容，同样做一次直播，同样做一次editorial 的一个 video 的话，这个成本是差不多的。那我一定是会给更高预算的广告主才更有效益。所以当我们中小型的游戏，或者是说当独立游戏去找他们的时候，他接的意愿也好，他做的用心的程度也好，一定是不如最 top 的那个游戏广告主的嘛。所以回应你的问题就是，当我们对自己了解的更深，我们对自己的标签描述的更准确的时候，我们找的推广渠道，我们找的influencer 其实就会更准确，更符合我们自己的这个 ROI 的一个评定嘛，成效的一个评定。
好，那因为场地时间关系，我们开放最后一个问题。
Lisa 你好，那我主要是想要了解一下说，你觉得以目前的手游市场，独立游戏团队还有切入的空间吗？
有，非常有，非常有。为什么这么说呢？是因为我们自己作为商店啊，我们已经感受到游戏的，这个同质化的程度是持续的提高的嘛。有2个时间点啊。第一个时间点是在17、18年的时候，其实游戏以我们来说的话，就是2次元游戏。2次元游戏的丰富程度是非常高的。那高预算的游戏有，低预算的游戏也有，大 IP 的有，然后原创的也不少，那是一个百花齐放的一个状态。但是呢，慢慢的，随着这种百花齐放，换一句话来说，就是鱼龙混杂。那随着这个质量的沉淀，其实也意味着头部的游戏逐渐的确定了下来。那再到19年、20年的时候，原神的出现，那这今天的大爆，那它其实也给到更多大的游戏厂商一个警觉，就是说这个赛道其实是可以做到非常大的一个市场空间的。那随着原神出现之后，反而让大厂进行到了一个军备竞赛的一个地步，也就是说就是在手游里面做 AAA 就变成了一个趋势嘛。然后这样子就把游戏开发的预算、时间成本、人力成本、水准全部都拉到一个高不可及的地步。而到了今天，其实我们看到这些大的制作很多都还没有推出的情况下，市场的状况已经发生了严重的紧缩。像许多的游戏公司已经开始砍项目，许多的大的互联网的公司已经没有更高的预算去像之前那样去投放了。那其实对于玩家来说，我们今天并不需要 另一个原神。以过去1年来我们看到的许许多多说对标原神的游戏都未必取得了很好的预期，而玩家真正需要的是下一个能够获得我的认可的游戏嘛。那么这个角度下，不同的游戏我们都认为是有机会的，而不同的游戏的真正值得经营的其实是玩法和风格嘛。那所以说今天说独立游戏有没有机会，其实所有的游戏都是一个好的机会吧，我们觉得啊。那独立游戏的机会就在于我们的创意，我们的创新性其实是大的商业公司、大的游戏公司所不具备的。现在的商业公司，以我们所知，目前新的游戏里面，其实很多都是在期待一个爆款，然后我去复制这个爆款的玩法，或者是我去抄一个非常快的去抄一个在美术层面、在制作层面都远远超过原来这款游戏的一个高配版。那么至于这个最初的最有创意的这个小的爆款到底是哪里来的呢？那很有可能就是在独立游戏界，或者是以独立游戏的形式出现在大家面前的。所以这是我们觉得内容行业创意仍然是最优先、最重要、最核心、最打动人的地方吧。
好，谢谢 Lisa 的讲解真的非常仔细，这样子。好，那因为今天场地的关系，所以我们就先到这里。好，那 Lisa 谢谢你，那希望之后还有机会再跟您合作这样子。
谢谢大家，谢谢。
好，谢谢。好，那待会离开现场的时候，提醒大家，第一个就是说，您的手上的耳机记得去外面把你的证件换回来，然后呢，外面有那个行销指南可以索取。好，那请大家记得索取。然后我们备有餐点，让大家以外带的形式带走，那都在那个门口的柜台那边可以领取。好，谢谢大家。